Welcome back to another exciting installment of Annual Town Meeting Warrant Review with Evan Brassard, the Town Administrator.
And William Blake, the Assistant Town Administrator.
All right. How you doing today, Will?
I'm delightful. How are you?
Good. All right, let's jump right into it. So this year's Annual Town Meeting is going to be held on May 13th at 7 p.m. in the high school auditorium. Just like years past, same format. We do have the clickers available. Those are electronic voting records. We also have 2 ASL interpreters this year, which will be great. So that's a welcome addition to what we're doing. I'm going to jump right in and talk about the overall idea of a consent agenda, and then we'll break up what those consent agendas are.
Yep, sounds good.
So the idea of a consent agenda is to lump a group of common articles together. These are articles that generally do not draw a lot of conversation or need a lot of explanation, and it's just a way to get town meeting to move forward a little bit quicker so that we can get to the meat and potatoes of what we need to get done for the upcoming fiscal year. So this year we have 2 consent agendas. The first one deals with expenditures or issues that need to be dealt with in the current fiscal year. And consent agenda number 2 deals with items for the upcoming fiscal year. So Will, you want to lead off?
Article 1 of Consent Agenda 1 is to transfer and appropriate a sum of money in the amount of $1,575,937.50 from the Road Improvement Stabilization Fund to the Road Improvement Capital Expenditure Fund. So essentially what this does is the Road Improvement Stabilization Fund collects the money. The expenditure fund allows us to actually use it for road improvement projects. So this just allocates the money to be used around town.
Right. Think about it like a savings account and a checking account.
Yep.
Money comes into the savings account. We then need to move it to the checking account so we can pay bills.
Exactly. Article 2 is to transfer and appropriate $15,000 from free cash to the Fire Department retirement account. Article 3 is to transfer and appropriate from free cash $50,000 to the OPEB trust account. So this is something Mary and you started doing every year to offset the town's overall OPEB liability. OPEB, for those of you who don't know, is other post-employment benefits, and is sort of one of those long-standing obligations of the town to cover retiree benefits.
Right. So think about it. Teachers, police officers, highway people, whoever it is, they retire. The town then still retains some ownership of their benefits, i.e. health insurance, and other costs associated with that.
Yep. Article 4 is several transfers all lumped into one, so it's an appropriation from free cash to 4 different line items. The overall appropriation is just over $300,000. There's a detailed, there will be a detailed list in the copy of the warrant that is printed for town meeting. Article 5 is to transfer and appropriate $51,000 from free cash to the Municipal Center EV charging station account. So in the last fiscal year, the town got a community compact grant from the state to put 6 EV charging stations in at the Municipal Center, 2 at the Senior Center, 2 at the Fleet charging location, and 2 in the front. The overall cost of that project came in a little bit higher than the grant that we got, so this offsets the cost so we can put all 3 stations and have access to all 6 chargers at once as opposed to having to spread them out over multiple fiscal years. Article 6 and Article 7 are both to accept provisions from Mass General Law, Chapter 59. One is Section 5K, the second is Section 5N, and both of those are tax abatement. So 5K is for senior citizens and 5N is for veterans or their dependents.
Right. All right. Well, thanks for that recap there, Will, on consent agenda number 1. It all seems pretty straightforward, and we will have explanations and other details as we work on this warrant going forward. All right. So I'm just going to jump right into consent agenda number 2. The first article is Article 8, and that's to hear reports of town officers. The town doesn't really hear reports anymore. This is a holdover back to basically colonial government where town officers would get up and give a report to town meeting. Now that report can be found online at any time on our town website, which is grafton-ma.gov.
Yes.
Got stuck there for a second. All right, on to Article 9. Article 9 is to appoint Roger J. Currier as a trustee of the Nelson Park Memorial Library and Building Fund for a term of 3 years. This is a annual article to appoint someone each year as their term expires to the Nelson Park trustees. Article 10 is to appropriate $502,553.26 to be utilized basically by Chapter 90, which is the roads improvement. So we get this grant from the state every year, and this is us actually appropriating the money so that it can be used. Article 11 of this year's town meeting warrant deals with surplus property. And again, this is just an annual article that authorizes the select board to be able to deem items surplus and then sell them consistent with our procurement policy and Chapter 30B of the Mass General Laws. Article 12 is to authorize the treasurer collector to borrow money in anticipation of expenditure. So as we go through a fiscal year, if we have bonds and other things that roll off or need to be reauthorized, they have the ability to then start that process in anticipation of the revenue being collected that fiscal year. Article 13 is what's called 53.5 in the Mass General Laws. These are revolving accounts, and pursuant to the Municipal Modernization Act of 2016, we now create a bylaw each and every year that reauthorizes all of the spending that we have in revolving accounts. And what revolving accounts are, in general terms, are accounts in which we can collect fees as a town and then appropriate them throughout the year without further authorization from town meeting.
And it's worth noting that the format of the chart is a little different this year in accordance with work done by the Bylaw Study Committee in the fall of last year.
Right. Great point. Great point. The last article in consent agenda number 2 is Article 14, and that deals with authorizing the select board to request funding transportation from WRTA, which is Worcester Regional Transit Authority, which we are partners with for the purposes of senior and disabled transportation services that we provide through the senior center for all different kinds of things, whether they're medical appointments or grocery shopping or whatever it is that people need assistance with. So, and that's it for consent agenda number 2.
Yeah, so once we get through those first 14 articles, we'll then move on to Article 15 through 38, I believe is the end.
Yep.
Which will all be individual votes, and provided nothing is pulled out of the consent agenda, these will all be discussed on their own. So Article 15 is to raise and appropriate a sum of money to defray the expenses for the ensuing fiscal year, which is the overall budget for the town.
Right.
So similar to the past couple of town meetings, we have 2 appendices in the warrant. Appendix A, which is a compressed version of the budget, and then Appendix A expanded, which is the omnibus. So that is more of a line item breakdown. So the overall appropriation is $75,776,967 for fiscal year 2025.
Excellent. Article 16 deals with our capital plan. For folks that don't know what capital items are one-time expenditures that we may have throughout the year, meaning they are not recurrent year over year over year. So this might be the purchase of a dump truck, a backhoe, a loader, a fire truck, a police car, could be any of those things, including buildings and building-related items. So this year's capital plan is a total expenditure of $2,096,000, and that is spread out over 2 appropriation sources. The first being our certified free cash, and that's $1,100,028,500. Our second being our capital stabilization account, which is $967,500. Items in this year's list are varying, but I'll give you a few highlights. We're going to buy a couple of lawnmowers to replace for cemetery and highway. We have a couple of dump trucks in there. We have some ADA improvements that we continue to fund throughout the community, which has been a really great program that we're doing. There's a whole bunch of different stuff for building upgrades for the school department, meaning PA systems, fire panels, and things like that. And then we've got some office furniture and other various items. One of the more exciting items to me is a new brush cutter that does roadside mowing. So this is a large tractor with an arm on it. We do get a lot of feedback from residents, especially now with Grafton becoming busier and busier, asking for areas of town to be mowed or the brush cut back so that you have better sight lines. And so this machine will help us to do that more efficiently and hopefully keep up as we come through the summer season.
Yep. Article 17 is the appropriation for the sewer budget for the upcoming fiscal year. So the Grafton Sewer Department is an enterprise fund, meaning that this appropriation is funded through service fees, not through taxpayer dollars. So the total appropriation for the sewer budget for FY25 is $3,676,085.
Great. Article 18 deals with the Cable Oversight Committee and the Grafton Community Television budget. The entire appropriation for this year is $404,500, and that, of course, is funded through fees collected through the cable program.
Article 19 covers the Town of Grafton's portion of the FY25 assessment for the Blackstone Valley Regional Technical School. This year's appropriation is $1,715,896, which covers net operating and capital expenses. This number is a little higher than it's been in the past. This year, Grafton has about 9 additional students enrolled at BVT. That $1.7 million also covers about $40,000 of exempted debt, which was incurred in 2001 for building expenses. And as we've seen with capital projects for building, when old debt starts to roll off, they typically look to incur new debt. So that is what Article 20 is. It's a request from Blackstone Valley Tech to raise $10 million in new debt, which would go to fund rooftop HVAC replacements at the school. So it's important to recognize that Grafton is a member of the Blackstone Valley Tech, so this article is on the warrant for all 10 or 12 member communities. So the overall approval of the debt appropriation will go to however the majority of those towns vote.
Right. And lastly, I do want to mention that it is contingent upon MSBA, which is Mass School Building Authority grant award. So this is I think that's important to note, because if the grant does not come through, then BBT needs to come back to us and to town meeting with a different plan for funding.
Yep.
All right. Moving on to Article 21. This is an important article. They all are, but this is an important article to explain more fully. So here we're asking the residents of Grafton to allow us to exclude $2.5 million in debt from Proposition 2.5 to purchase a new ladder fire truck. And the reason that we're doing that is, one, $2.5 million is a lot of money for us to try to fit into our normal capacity. But also, this is a long-term building process. So we would authorize this debt this May for $2.5 million. The fire department would then order their truck over the summer, and it will be at least 3 years until that truck is delivered. So the average time frame for this would be, we get the truck in 3 years. This excluded debt does not even hit the tax rate until year 4. And that's if we stay on track with year 3. So I do want to explain to people that this is a very large purchase. The truck is very expensive, but it is a very long process, so we want to get started early.
And just to expound on that, when you say the debt wouldn't hit the tax rate, taxpayers wouldn't see the increase from this excluded debt for 4 years.
Right, at the earliest, really. Yep. And I'm going to roll right into Article 22. So Article 22 allows us to accept the provisions of 44, Section 54, subsection B, which allows us to invest trust funds under what's called the Prudent Investment Rule. So the Prudent Investment Rule allows us to take those OPEB funds that we talked about and effectively invest them like you would your retirement savings, so that as that money grows and as your interest compounds, we're using money to make money so that we have to ask less of the taxpayers.
The next three articles on the warrant all pertain to the Board of Sewer Commissioners. So Article 23 is a vote to transfer and appropriate $150,000 from the sewer retained earnings account to the major equipment account. Article 24 is to transfer and appropriate $150,000 from the sewer retained earnings account to the operation and management emergency account. You'll see that listed as O&M. And Article 25 is to transfer and appropriate $150,000 from the sewer retained earnings account to the plant upgrade and expansion account. If you look at the past 3 or 4 years worth of town meeting warrants, you'll see similar articles from the Board of Sewer Commissioners all in May.
Article 26 is the funding of CPC. So this is pretty standard. The numbers change slightly, but it separates the money out into the different buckets. So there's community administrative expenses, which is $24,000. Historic reserves, which is $78,409. Affordable housing, which is $78,409. Open space, which is $78,409. And then the budgeted reserve, which is $464,846. This is, again, a pretty standard appropriation, and this is what separates the money so that CPC can then allocate it at a later date. All right. All right, we're going to roll into Article 27. Article 27 continues to fund the purchase of the Pell Farm property that Grafton uses for conservation. It is a $60,000 outlay, and this is the 16th of 20 payments for a total of appropriation over that time frame of $1.2 million. All right, on to Article 28. This is a continuation of the historic reserve funding. This is the 10th out of 20 payments of interest and principal for a total of $1.1 million bond. This payment is $75,000, and this is for the restoration of the Grafton Townhouse. Article 29 is the establishment of the Grafton Housing Authority's Jim Gallagher Rental Assistance Program for Grafton Housing Authority residents and applicants. So this is a $20,000 appropriation to start that process, which will help people get into housing authority funded living, which is great. And it's a great way to remember Jim Gallagher and all he did for the town of Grafton.
Yep.
Article 30 is $194,000 for the restoration and preservation of the Cisco homestead. Article 31 continues the articles submitted by the Community Preservation Committee. It's a $120,000 appropriation for the Congregational Church of Grafton to fund the exterior restoration and preservation of that property. Article 32 is, again, a CPC article. This is $65,000 from the Historic Reserve for the Baptist Church of Grafton to fund restoration of the front columns on the church, which is pretty integral to the look of the community, and I think that's the intent between those two articles for CPC and the churches that are here in Grafton. So, Article 33 is for $152,109, and that is a transfer to the CPA Affordable Housing Reserve to be utilized by the Grafton Affordable Housing Trust. Article 34 is the last CPC article. That is for $651,723 for the purposes of restoring the historic Grafton Common. And so this is really just an extension of the sunset provision from a previously funded project. And this just continues that work that CPC has done at the Common, and it has come out beautiful. Yeah, it beyond words how nice that came out.
Yep. Article 35 is to see if the town will vote to alter the layout of Follett Street for the reconstruction of the Depot Street Sutton Bridge over the Blackstone River. So the town of Sutton is doing work on the Depot Street Bridge, and they've run into an issue where they need one area of Follett Street in Grafton. They need to be able to take an easement to access the bridge to get the work done. What this does is alter the layout of Follett Street so that easement is available so they can complete the project.
Right. Okay. Article 36 has been submitted by the Grafton Planning Board. This is an article that is quite lengthy, but realistically just changes the acronym DHCD to EOHLC, which is changing the Department of Housing and Community Development to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. So a little bit of a mouthful, but that's really the intent behind that entire article.
Yep. Article 37 is another submission from the Planning Board, and it seeks to amend Section 1.3.3.4, Site Plan Review of the Grafton Zoning Bylaw. It strikes one section referencing the associate member being allowed to vote on site plan reviews, and this is so the bylaw is compliant with state regulations.
Article 38 is another article submitted by the Grafton Planning Board. This article makes some clerical changes as well as some process changes. So consistent with Article 37, this deals with the voting provisions of the Planning Board, and then also shifts some of the onus onto design for crosswalks and other furnishings, and makes that a little bit more clear in our current bylaws.
Yep.
On this year's warrant, Articles 39 through 43 deal with citizens' petitions. Now, under Mass General Law, Chapter 39, Section 10, residents are permitted to petition their local government through a different series of mechanisms in order to ask for changes at the local law level, and they ask town meeting to approve those changes. So while Will and I are going to discuss or review the content of those articles, we are not going to speak to the intent of those because they are not our articles to speak to.
Yep, and it's important to note that the submitters of these articles will be present at town meeting to speak to the intent of the article.
Right, great point, thank you.
So Article 39 is a change to the village mixed-use section of the zoning bylaws, and what this does is change the bylaw to allow clinics as a primary use as opposed to an accessory use.
Article 40 deals with a charter change for Grafton's home rule charter, which, if you're not unfamiliar with that document, you can find on our website, grafton-ma.gov. And this seeks to change Section 8-5, Town Administrator Organization, from the current iteration, which is subsection B, the town administrator shall appoint an inspector of buildings to serve for an indefinite term, a wiring inspector to serve for an indefinite term, and an inspector of gas appliances and fittings for an indefinite term. And that would be changed to new subsection B, the town administrator shall appoint an inspector of buildings to serve for a 3-year term, a wire inspector to serve for a term of 3 years, and an inspector of gas and appliances and gas fittings, to serve for a term of 3 years or take any other action relative thereto.
Yep. Article 41 is another proposed change to the Grafton Town Charter, and it seeks to add language which states town officials shall devote full time to the office and shall not hold any other public office, elective or appointed, nor engage in any other business or occupation that overlaps with the town office's hours, and then lists the operating hours for Town Hall: Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Tuesday, 8:30 a.m. to 7 p.m., and Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 1 p.m.
All right. And Article 42 is to see if the town will vote to add to the Grafton Charter the following language: the town administrator shall provide for an annual review of the job performance of town officers, which shall, at least in summary form, be a public record. Now, while we will not speak to the intent of those last three, I do think it's important to let residents know that if you're interested in seeing what the petitioner had to say about their articles, you can go on to GCTV's website or our YouTube or any of the places where you can find GCTV programming and look at the April 16th Select Board meeting. And that gentleman did come in and explain some of his reasons for submitting the articles.
Yep. And the last article on the town meeting warrant, Article 43, is to see if the town of Grafton will vote to accept the roadway, associated utilities, and easements known as Elm Rock Drive in the Elm Rock Estate subdivision as petitioned for by more than 10 registered voters of the town, or take any other action relative thereto. And similar to what Evan just said, the petitioner was present at the April 16th Select Board meeting to speak to the intent of that article.
Right. And so was ZBA member Bill McCusker, as that has gone through the entire process and is basically at that point in the process. All right, well, that wraps up our annual warrant review. Thank you for joining us. Please come down to the annual town meeting, which is Monday, May 13th at 7 p.m. in the Grafton High School Auditorium. Whether it's your first time attending town meeting or your 100th time, we hope to see you there. I think we're going to get a lot accomplished and move on to the next fiscal year. So we're looking forward to it.
I agree. I think it's going to be a good night.
All right. So for the town administrator's office, I'm Evan Brassard.
And I'm William Blake.
Catch you next time.